Chapter 35. Recruited. David showed up promptly at 8 o'clock and joined Ari in the living room, sitting next to him in front of the picture window. He wasted no time getting down to business. "There are some bizarre aspects to what I'm going to tell you," he began, leaning forward and punctuating the tension in his voice by stroking the knuckles of his strong, restless fingers. The lights had just gone on, illuminating the dome of the rock and the western wall, but the magnificent view was lost on these two. Yakov could be heard rinsing dishes at the sink in the kitchen. "Come on in here," yelled David, a slight edge of irritation in his voice. "Stop pretending you're so busy. You'll be giving advice soon enough, so you might as well get in on the beginning." "I'm not pretending. I am busy, but I'll join you since you insist." Grinning widely, Yakov came into the living room, wiping his hands on the apron he was wearing, and sat down in his favorite spot in the rocker. It was an unwritten law that no one else used that special chair. "First, some background," began David. "You know, of course, at the highest level there is a secret partnership between East and West to form a new world order, and it goes beyond anything Bush or Gorbachev or the Pope imply in their public statements." "I'm aware of that. All they've said so far," agreed Ari, "is that Saddam Hussein's fate will be shared by any other aggressor. We've entered a new era of peace, no tolerance of aggression, and a new era, too, of international banking and trade cooperation and shared wealth with developing nations. That's basically the New World Order as it's been publicly presented. But in fact," continued David, "what they have in mind is a world government with its own military and police force." "Exactly. That's what the consortium that financed me is all about. But I never got that impression from them. I had to find it out for myself." "Okay, we all know that." David leaned back in his chair and spoke slowly. "What if I told you that extraterrestrial intelligences are involved in this whole picture?" His eyes, under half-closed lids, were watching Ari's reaction closely. "Sure, little green men," said Ari with a quick laugh. "He can't be referring to the 9, or is he? How could he know about them? I can't ask him. I've been sworn to secrecy." "No, I'm serious," said David without changing his position or relaxing his veiled gaze. "Do you have a problem with that?" "Well, I thoroughly infiltrated the group that financed me, and nothing like this ever came to my attention." "It's not known at that level. This is the CIA's most closely guarded secret. We think it's being kept from President Bush. At least he doesn't know the full extent of ETI involvement." "I suppose it's theoretically possible," admitted Ari, "but it still sounds like science fiction, or the stories cooked up by lunatics, beamed aboard flying saucers and all that garbage. They're not all crazies. We happen to know that the United States is in touch with ETIs at a top-secret psychic research center south of San Francisco near Stanford University. That contact put the Americans far ahead of the Soviets in the race for psychic power. In fact, it's no contest anymore." "You've got solid evidence?" countered Ari cautiously. "I can't even hint at what it is. It could jeopardize our agents. But to answer your question, yes, we have." "If this is really true," exclaimed Ari, "it's the most important development in the history of the planet. It would change everything." "It already has. Why do you think the Soviets had to abandon their plans for world conquest and enter into a partnership with the West? Sure, most of the old-line party members and military men don't know the truth, and the KGB is mostly in the dark. That makes it tough for Gorbachev. He learned about the ETI involvement with the CIA several years ago. How he learned it, we don't know, though we suspect he's had direct contact himself." "You really think so?" interrupted Ari, fascinated by what David, a high-level Mossad agent, was telling him. "There's no other explanation why he wrote Perestroika in 1987, brought the Berlin Wall down, and dissolved the Warsaw Pact. His fear of these entities, who have chosen to work only with the United States so far, has colored every move he's made since then. They're literally forcing Earthlings to get together." "If that's true," mused Ari, "it would answer some questions. I never could understand what motivated Gorby, why he'd tear down everything 70 years of communism had built. Of course, Marxism didn't work, but I thought he'd keep the Kremlin old guard in power and move into a modified socialism. And I couldn't buy the Golitsyn scenario, that it was all a KGB plot to get the West to finance their troubles, then nuke us. Anyway, it's gone too far now. They'll never put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Yes and no, countered David. As far as we're concerned, Anatoly Golitsyn is legit. There's no doubt he was near the top of the KGB when he defected. We've got confirmation of his story, that the KGB planned to dupe the West into financing bankrupt Eastern Bloc satellites by giving them freedom, uniting East and West Germany, bringing down the wall. Solid confirmation? Interrupted Ari. Yep, but we think Gorbachev used that KGB plot as a cover for his own plan. How long he'll retain power as the USSR unravels is anybody's guess, and it isn't all that important. If he's ousted by some internal power play, that might even increase his popularity worldwide, which is where his real interests lie. ETI sharing their power with the CIA, mused Ari thoughtfully. Sounds like a sci-fi thriller, but it does put some of the pieces of the puzzle together. Ari and David sat in thoughtful silence. Yakov had reached out to take a large volume from the coffee table and was leafing through it noisily. So, you think ETIs are actually directing international politics through the U.S. from behind the scenes, and Gorbachev has had to go along with it, summarized Ari slowly. Awesome. Unbelievable. It is awesome, agreed David. Terrifying. In fact, that's the major problem the U.S. faces. How to reveal this contact without causing worldwide panic. Solving that problem is a primary goal of the CIA installation near Stanford. So what's Israel's special concern? The ETIs are very much anti-Israel. No, it's a fact. And recently, Hafez Assad has been stating publicly that he believes in UFOs and that ETIs are the only ones with the capability of achieving a peaceful settlement in the Middle East. I remember reading the interview where he first said that and wondering whether he'd gone out of his mind, Ari mused. Is it possible that the same ETIs that the CIA is in touch with have made contact with Syria and perhaps other Muslim countries? We don't know, admitted David, but these statements that Assad's been making in interviews with the international media are giving us fits. Maybe it's just a personal opinion, another one of the kooky ideas that grows out of being president of Syria, Ari remarked. I don't see why ETIs, if they ever got to Earth, would be on Syria's side against Israel. Why would they be anti-Israel? David gestured toward Yakov. He could explain that better than I could because he reads the Bible all the time. He even believes it, from cover to cover, as he hastens to tell everyone. Amazingly, these entities see the Bible as a great threat to the New World Order. The Bible says, broke in Yakov, the demons believe and tremble. They've got enough sense to take the Bible seriously, which is more than can be said for either of you. Are you saying the ETIs are demons, and that's why they take the Bible seriously? Demanded David. I am. Even if that's so, which I think is nonsense, countered David quickly, that doesn't mean the ETIs think it's true. I'd agree that the ETIs take the Bible seriously, but only because nearly 2 billion people believe it. Millions of people accept the fable that the Jews are God's chosen people, and that's what concerns the ETIs, or Gorbachev, or the Pope, or anyone else interested in forming a new world order. And with good reason, added Ari. Obviously, anybody who's expecting some resurrected Messiah to rule the world from Jerusalem is at odds with the Bush-Gorbachev-John Paul II New World Order that you think the ETIs support. You know what I think of this, cut in Yakov, taking advantage of the opening David had given him. There are no created beings outside this planet except angels or demons. Angels don't pose as ETIs, but it would be an ideal cover for demons. That's who the U.S. is dealing with, and the whole world is going to fall into the trap. David winked at Ari. We humor him when he talks nonsense, because in the next breath he'll come up with something brilliant. Ari gave Yakov an incredulous stare. You're saying there couldn't be highly evolved humanoid creatures on even one of the billions of planets in the universe? that must be orbiting around suns similar to our own? Come on, old man. It's the only reasonable conclusion based on the facts, replied Yakov unhesitatingly. The same Torah that gives us the only sensible explanation for Jewish uniqueness and persecution throughout history says that God created man. I can believe that, but I can't believe that life and intelligence evolved from a big bang of energy. Pure chance could never, not in trillions of years, produce even one living cell, much less the human body and brain, much less individual personalities and abstract concepts such as beauty, truth, and justice. You don't get an encyclopedia from an explosion in a print shop. Evolution is a myth. Only an infinite designer could produce the intricately designed organisms living on this earth. There was passion in his voice. Okay, countered Ari, suppose your God created life on this planet. Why couldn't he have done it on some other planets? And why couldn't such creatures have developed a technology for visiting Earth, just as we've been able to visit the moon? David rose abruptly from his chair, went over to stand in front of the window, and stared sullenly into the night. Obviously, he hadn't suspected Yakov would take this tack, and he didn't want any part of such a discussion. Motioning to Ari to ignore David, Yakov continued, Creatures anywhere in the universe with the power of choice would rebel against their creator, just as we've done. God doesn't have to experiment by creating human-like beings on other planets to see what would happen. He already knows. According to the Bible, this planet is unique, the focus of God's battle with Satan for control of the universe. There's no hint that similar creatures live on other planets. You can convert him when I'm not here, grumbled David impatiently, turning around to face Ari and Yakov. My time's limited, and I stopped by tonight with a specific purpose in mind. Can we get on with it? Go ahead, said Yakov in a voice edged with misgiving. Recruit Ari. I'm not stopping you. But I just want him, and you too, to know what you're going to be up against on this particular project. Let's forget the ETIs for a minute, continued David. We'll come back to that later. Would you be uncomfortable working for Israeli intelligence? The Mossad? Asked Ari, wanting to be precise. That's a word we don't speak here in Israel because it doesn't exist, countered David quickly. Let's call it the office. Ari thought for a minute. I don't mind working for the office, he said at last, but it depends upon what you want. We need information, the kind that doesn't come over the wires at the post. I hope you don't mean the data I gathered on the consortium, said Ari warily. We settled that. Of course not. Something else, and perhaps even more important in the long run. I don't see that I'm in a position to gather any information. I thought that was a specialty of that unmentionable organization. David laughed. How do you think we get our intelligence? We have very few highly trained officers. We call them katzas. But we have thousands of unpaid volunteers, Sayanim, around the world. They're our lifeblood. You can see why. I doubt that we've got 1,500 employees on the payroll in the entire world, including secretaries and janitors. Compare that with 25,000 just at the CIA's Langley headquarters and 250,000 KGB employees worldwide. So we have to rely heavily on volunteers. You'd simply pass along certain information. We'll teach you how to gather and transmit it. I can't travel abroad, responded Ari pessimistically. What information can I pick up for you here in Israel? You'll be traveling, said David matter-of-factly. I've already cleared that. Just before coming to Israel, you had contact in Paris with a former student, Carla Bertelli. Is that right? What about her? Ari asked uneasily. Could they possibly know about the exchange of purses? The data I gave her? We want you to write to her. Phoning would be too pushy. Let her know where you are, that you're writing for the Post. That should interest her and cultivate her friendship. Why get in touch with her? Ari's suspicions were aroused once again. This didn't look good. She's involved in that CIA psychic research lab near Stanford where they're in touch with ETIs. Carla is? She told me she was reporting on psychic research, but I had no idea she'd hit the jackpot. Of course she wouldn't tell you, but she's in this up to her eyeballs. If you play the game right, she'll pass on the information we need. We'll give you plenty of help." Ari was breathing a bit easier now. "So that's where I come in, my connection to Carla." "Okay, I'll do my best. What are my orders?" David turned back to the window and stared into the distance in silence. "There's more to it than that," he said at last without turning around. "But I can't explain that right now. Your immediate goal is to get an invitation to visit her." "In the States?" "In California, at the Psychic Research Center. The first step, of course, is to get back in touch and renew your friendship. Write to her today. Let me know how it goes."